Have you ever been denied accommodations or told no because of your diabetes? Sadly, I think this is a feeling we can all relate to. A time when you have to over-explain your devices and care. A time when you need to stand up for yourself and your safety. Being that diabetes is often an invisible disease, we sometimes face skepticism when advocating for ourselves is necessary. And today, we have a story that gets just into that. Welcome to the show. I'm Justin. I have type 1 diabetes, and on here, I talk all things diabetes tech, news, and research. We've got our podcast on Mondays where we speak with leaders in the space, and we've got videos on Fridays where we review all the tech. Today, we're introducing a new series that highlights community stories from people with diabetes just like you and me, and we're sharing these stories in under 15 minutes. We want to use these videos to share experiences, tips, hardships, and wins, all real world experiences. So let us know what you think of this new format. I am so excited about it. And if you or someone you know has a story that is worth being featured, let us know with a comment on here. And also, even better, DM me on Instagram. I'm actually pretty good at looking at those. Today, we are speaking with Bill Reed, who is making waves across digital diabetes communities. Bill tried to bring juice into a movie theater as a low snack, and he was denied entry. From Reddit to Facebook to Twitter, Bill's brush with diabetes discriminatory behavior has left an impression and sparked a lot of great conversation about how we can best advocate for ourselves. This conversation is to show you that you aren't alone and the responsibility we have to advocate for ourselves and how the diabetes community can be a strong support system for you. So hopefully this discussion will be a resource for you to help you arm yourself the best way possible if this ever happens to you. All right, let's get into it. Bill, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on to share your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Justin, thank you so much for having me. It's sometimes when you when you're bumping up against a situation that is really challenging, that highlights the difficulties of diabetes, sometimes it's easy to feel alone. And I'm really thankful to be able to tell the story with you and to this audience. And I'm thankful for all the other people with diabetes who have chimed in and shared their stories as well.
Yeah, and I'm thankful that you reached out to me and that we could, have this conversation to help arm others. Kind of just walk us through that evening. What happened when you arrived to the theater?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a Friday night. My wife and I had decided, hey, this is going to be a great time to go to a movie. Our daughter was with her grandparents and we had a free moment. So we went to a movie theater right down the road from us. Yeah, but I've had type 1 diabetes for 39 years, right? I'm 41. So since I was 2 years old, I kind of know how to handle my disease for the most part. And in general, I know what I need to be safe. And so when we went to the movie theater, I have a thing I always do. I carry a water bottle with me. And in that water bottle, I have one of three things. I have apple juice, I have white grape juice, or I have a fruit drink mix. Here's the water bottle right here. I have it with me all the time. And so when I walked into the theater and I went to the ticket stand to check in, the general manager pulled me aside and he said, hey, you can't come in with that. And, I've had this experience tons of times in my life, right? Like, this is my move. This is what I do. I know how to have this conversation. Mm-hmm. And so I told the manager, I said, oh, hey, I actually have type 1 diabetes. And under Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act, theaters are places of public accommodation. And so I'm allowed to, ask for an accommodation, a reasonable accommodation to allow me to be safe during the movie. I've said that hundreds of times in my life. But today, or that Friday, the general manager, he said, I know what you're trying to do. That was the first time I've ever had that experience of being met with mistrust. I appreciate that his job is probably hard. He probably sees a lot of people trying to come into a theater and say, oh, I've got diabetes. You should let me bring in my snacks. And I told him, I said, oh, well, look, here's my insulin pen. I pulled that out of my pocket and I showed it to him. I pulled up my arm and showed him my Freestyle Libre sensor. And I even showed him on my phone. I said, look, my blood sugar right now is actually 69. It's actually low. And his response to that was unexpected. It was, I know what you're trying to do. And it was one of those moments of like, it kind of took me back in time a little bit, right? Like as a diabetic, we've all had that experience of feeling other, of feeling left out, of not being able to do the things that everyone else can do. And so in this moment, I was feeling that sense of being excluded in a sense. I was embarrassed. It was a Friday night, the same weekend that the Spider-Man movie was opening. And so there were tons of people over the place. People were watching the conversation happening and I had a low blood sugar. So it's like three things kind of made this a really challenging moment.
How were you feeling in that moment?
I knew I was low. I was 69, so I was just on the way down. So 69 slanted down. I knew I was low, but my plan was, hey, get to the movie, sit down in the chair, and then I'll sip my juice. It'll be fine. We'll watch the movie. But I was at the point where I was feeling a little bit shaky. My hands were shaking at that moment, and I even pointed out to the gentleman I was speaking to. I said, "Look, you can hear from my voice. You can hear I'm having trouble speaking clearly, and I'm having trouble communicating clearly." So yeah, Justin, I wasn't I wasn't feeling great.
And I think to a lot of people listening that don't have diabetes, it may not sound that big of a deal. Like, dude, just go to the concessions, buy a Coke there. But first of all, I mean, that's like, I call that the diabetes tax, and we shouldn't have to do that. But the
Yeah,
reason we carry these things with us is because of this incredible disease that we have and the trauma and experiences we've had before. And I know that this water bottle has become an important tool for you and go to for you because of even past experiences. And one of those, wasn't that one of those in a movie theater in 2003?
yeah, it was. Yeah, it's a long time ago, right? I was in high school, and I went to see a movie in 2003, and during the movie, I was a teenager. Let's remember that. So I was still in that phase of not taking care of my diabetes super well. But yeah, I was sitting in the theater, and I started to have a low blood sugar, and so I got up from the movie I was watching, and I walked to the concession stand. And in the 2 minutes it took me to stand up and get to the concession stand, I'd gone from being feeling low but being okay to not being able to speak clearly anymore. And so when I got to the concession stand, I went up to the stand and I was trying to communicate that I wanted to buy some candy to make my blood sugar better. But I was speaking gibberish. I was at the point where I could do some one syllable words, but my words were just coming out garbled and confused. And even funnier about this is that my younger brother actually worked at the theater and he was there that night. And so you would think if anybody would know, it would be my younger brother, right? And
Yeah.
so I was able to flag him down behind the counter. Even in my kind of confused state, I was able to stumble out two words, help me. And he had no idea what was going on. He had no idea what I was talking about. So after I couldn't get help from my brother, I turned around and I wandered across the street to a Chili's because I'd been there a bunch of times. I guess in my low blood sugar stupor, I kind of, well, here's the next place I'll go to get some food. And when I got to Chili's, someone there recognized that something was wrong and was able to get me some food and help me feel better. But to your point, I've experienced the bad side of you can't just walk to a concession stand sometimes because a low blood sugar can come on very, very quickly.
I've been to movies before. I've been to a Broadway show before where I don't have low snacks on me. A Broadway show being even in my opinion even more scary because it's live show. Like no one gets up. No one gets up during a Broadway musical from the middle row, the middle of the row to go to the bathroom. And I've had panic attacks. You have your water bottle. This is your go-to. You're not let in. You don't see the movie. You leave do you leave out of principle? Or what, your wife's there, kind of what is that decision, I guess, to leave? I
Yeah.
would leave out of principle, honestly.
Yeah, it's so funny is it was one of those moments where I feel like generally when I'm having conversations, I'm usually pretty sharp. I'm usually pretty good to respond to them. But I think that there was just as much, having a low blood sugar, being sort of embarrassed, being kind of shocked. I was a little bit taken aback. And the manager told me, he said I had two options. One option was to leave my water bottle in the car and come into the movie. The other option was to leave, to get a refund and leave. And, you know, I've had diabetes long enough to know that it's not worth the risk. I know that I could go into that movie and maybe I'd be fine, but also it could also turn out really terribly. And so I wish I could say it was the principle of the matter, but I think honestly, it was just knowing that if I'm not going to advocate for my health and for my safety, no one else is going to do that. And so I need to make sure that it's not safe for me to go into this theater. So I'm going to leave and I'm going to find a way to, to try to fight this and escalate this because this is wrong and it's against the law. And, as type 1 diabetics, we have to advocate for ourselves. And like you said earlier, this is an invisible disease. Not everyone's going to see it. And if we don't call attention to it, people aren't going to notice. They're not going to know that we need some help.
Yeah, and you did just that. I know that you asked the employee there for some information. He wasn't really budging, so you went to Reddit.
I did. I went to Reddit. Yeah, it's so funny. I love Reddit. I think it's a
Who
great
doesn't go to
community.
Reddit? I love Reddit.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
If you're
Reddit is
not
an
going to
awesome.
Reddit, then you don't get it.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And I went to the type 1 diabetes community and the diabetes community. So they're two separate subreddits. And I put up a post and I basically just asked the question. I said, has this ever happened to you? And what would you do? And I shared my story there. And it was, again, I forget this sometimes because how often do you see type 1 diabetics in the wild? But being in a community of type 1 diabetics, it's amazing because these people, we care about each other. We have similar life experiences. We've gone through the same kinds of things. And it was really cool to see so many people just responding really strongly to like, this is wrong, and to share their experiences, to share advice. One of the really cool parts of it is that someone reached out through Reddit and they said, hey, look, I can help you get contact information for executives at the theater chain. And they helped me get 9 different email addresses for executives and board members at the theater chain so that I could reach out and tell this story. And there's just tons of great advice. Like through the advice of this community, I submitted a complaint with the Department of Justice for ADA compliance reasons. And I was also able to submit to the state that I live in a complaint to the Secretary of State. And all of that came through people from Reddit giving advice on here's how you handle this kind of situations. Other diabetics who were like, let me help you figure out how to navigate this. And I don't think in a lot of cases it was people just being like pulling it out of their head. Some of the people were sharing Google results and links to places that I could go because they were invested. It was actually really amazing. And I'm really thankful for the community.
So what prompted you you even reached out to me? And I know you reached out to some other people in the community as well. What were your hopes for, I guess, by reaching out to people like us?
I figured that you talk to so many more people with diabetes. You talk to so many more leaders, other influencers. How do we make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else? So that was, I came to you for your expertise and just for your connections of maybe you can help me figure out the right way to do this.
And so now you are in touch with leadership. So far, what is the feedback you've gotten from them?
Yeah, I was really nervous sending those emails to all of those executives and leaders at this company. I wasn't sure if I was going to get kind of blown off. I wasn't sure if I was going to get someone kind of pushing back on me or if I was going to get someone being kind and thoughtful. I'm actually really thankful. I got a call Monday evening from one of the executives of the company that I had emailed, and he sincerely apologized. He made sure that I knew that this was not their company policy and that this was wrong, and that this would not happen again. He said that it was a little bit early to be able to tell me all the steps they were going to take because it had just happened. But he did tell me that they're going to implement training and to make sure that their employees, their general managers, the people that work in their theaters understand how to handle people that have disabilities that are covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
How did you know? And you were so prepared with this. I'm not prepared with that. I wouldn't know what I would say besides like I have diabetes, I'm allowed to do this.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's sort of funny you say that, as I actually don't feel like I'm that prepared. I feel like one of my endocrinologists years ago clued me into some of the protections that I have having type 1 diabetes, which is classified as a disability. I'll be honest, for a long time, I did not like classifying type 1 diabetes as a disability because I didn't want to feel like I was disabled, like I was different. But all that to say is that the one thing I'm very, very familiar with and is very clear to me is Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act classifies theaters as a place of public accommodation. And what that means that they're required to make reasonable accommodations or modifications to their policies for people with disabilities. And type 1 diabetes is a clear example for that. For a movie theater, for me to bring in snacks or drinks to manage your blood sugar, that is a reasonable modification of policy. So I knew that, and that was what I went with.
You said that this isn't just your story. What would you hope people with diabetes take away from hearing all of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I would say, Justin. I think the first thing is that you have to advocate for yourself. There are so many times that you're going to bump up against rules that are put in place for the masses. And if you have a disability like diabetes, sometimes you need different rules. You need different ways to approach the world. For instance, for me being told by that manager of like, we'll just walk to the concession stand. Well, that's dangerous for me. That doesn't work for a type 1 diabetic. And so I would say, make sure to know what you're able, like the accommodations that you're entitled to, I would also say that you're not alone in this. When I'm waking up at 2 a.m. with low blood sugar, it's really easy to feel like this is me alone in my little in my little shell. But that's not true. I'm talking to you. You have type 1 diabetes. On the Reddit posts, I was shocked to see that there were almost 50,000 people that had read through it. It had like 170 comments through them. There are a lot of us out there, and we're all having similar experiences. Don't think that you're alone, because you're not. There are tons of people who care about you and care about the experiences you're having. And then the last one, and this one, someone else pointed this out to me, but I think it's probably the most important piece of that. For me, I've had diabetes for 39 years. I know what to expect. I know when to advocate for myself. But I think of someone in that same situation. Maybe they're 14 or 15 years old and they've just been diagnosed in that past year. And this is the first time that they're choosing to go to a movie with their friends. And they bump up against this situation. And rather than advocating for themselves, they don't want to cause a scene. And so like, oh yeah, I'll leave my snacks in the car. And then that leads to a really bad situation. That's the thing I don't want to happen. I want to make sure that we all know that we have rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it is so, so important to exercise the rights. And if you find someone that's pushing back or not allowing you to have your rights, that is a time where you need to escalate, pull in other people, pull in legal counsel if it's necessary, reach out to the company, because it's really, really important to protect yourself and to protect other people that have the same disease we do.
Bill, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you sharing your story, and thank you all for listening. If you or a friend or a loved one has a story worth sharing, be sure to DM me on Instagram at diabet_tech, and we will try and include you in our new series. Thank you all for listening. I'm Justin. That's Bill, and we'll tech you later.